Well, I want to thank my colleague for yielding for a question, and I want to thank him and my colleague from New Jersey, Senator Booker, and also Senator Blumenthal, for galvanizing the sentiment that has existed for some time among many of us that enough is enough, that it's outrageous that it took another mass shooting to bring us to this moment in the United States Senate. You know, on Sunday morning, I woke up, as did the nation, heartbroken by the news that 49 human beings were killed in another senseless act of violence. 49 people who were at a dance club celebrating Pride Week. By the way, most of them overwhelmingly Latino. 49 Americans celebrating in an environment that they felt safe. And in an instant, their lives were shattered and families were broken. So I believe this was an attack on all of us. And we need more than another moment of silence. Although we take a moment of silence to remember those lives who were lost, but we need more than another moment of silence. We need more. I'm tired of saying that our hearts and prayers go out to the families of those who lost a loved one who were injured. We need more than a vigil and a bouquet. We need action. We need common sense gun safety laws. We need to stand together with one voice, and I hope that we can prick the conscience of the Senate to finally act. I deeply appreciate my colleague from New Jersey, Senator Booker, who has passionately described the ongoing threat of gun violence in our communities. We are galvanized in this moment because we had such a horrific act. But in many ways, those horrific acts take place every day in the streets and neighborhoods of our communities across the country. And while they may not add to so many lives lost at a single event, they add up to many lives lost, and they seem to go largely unreported. We have become desensitized to that reality. And he has seen the havoc that's wreaked by the nation's lax gun laws when he was the mayor of Newark. And I have seen it in the streets of our communities in New Jersey. The threat of those who are prone to violence, those looking to vent their anger or their prejudices, those who would act on their own worst instincts towards others, for whatever reason, have easy access to weapons of war. It isn't limited to Orlando. It isn't limited to Aurora. It isn't limited to Newtown. It isn't limited to any state or any city. People travel. Guns are trafficked. And the violence and the carnage they create in the wrong hands knows no borders. We need to act and say no more. No more. It's inexcusable in the midst of America's nonstop gun violence epidemic to not come together, to hold the common sense center and pass gun safety measures that we know are supported by a vast majority of the American people. How in God's name can a person on the terrorist watch list, unable to board a plane, so dangerous that they cannot fly, so dangerous that they are known to the FBI, how can they walk into a gun store and walk out with an automatic weapon and hundreds of rounds of ammunition and nothing is flagged? And what does it say that our nation's laws are so wildly misguided that a potential terrorist doesn't even have to go to a gun store? They can simply open up their computer and click with a mouse on a website, or they can go to a gun show and buy a deadly weapon, 2 deadly weapons, 4 military style designed for war, without even a cursory background check. Mr. President, that's unbelievable. It defies logic, and it's time to do something about it. Now, I don't believe that these are controversial proposals. A majority of Americans agree with universal background checks. Got nothing to hide. You can still have access to a weapon if you can pass those background checks. Even a majority of NRA members agree with universal background checks. It makes sense. It's a position upon which we should all be able to agree. It's a position that holds the center and can be a starting point for a larger discussion. And the fact that we haven't gotten to do this is, in my mind, a national disgrace. Frankly, it needed to have happened already. It should have happened after Aurora, when a madman ruined movie theaters for the rest of us. It should have happened after Virginia Tech, where gun violence invaded our colleges. It should have happened after Sandy Hook, where gun violence came to our elementary schools. So I'm reminded of that old Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Let's at least have the will and the resolve to do what's right now. Do you know how long it takes to get an AR-15, the weapon used in this horrific attack? Well, a Philadelphia Inquirer Daily News reporter decided to find out. The answer? 7 minutes. It took 7 minutes. That's all the time it took to get a weapon that has a frightening number of similarities to the M16 rifle used by the military. And it was pointed out in that article that it could take more time to read the names of the more than 100 people who were either killed or injured in Orlando than to buy the AR-15. Of course, that model is just the base model. Go to a gun store and you can buy a variety of add-ons to make the weapon kill that much more. Yes, kill. This isn't about hunting. If you need something that has hundreds of rounds in it to hunt a deer, my God, you're in trouble. The prime example is the bump fire stock, which increases the gun rate of fire up to 800 rounds per minute. 800 rounds per minute. That's more than 13 per second. Now, I know maybe the NRA will claim that these are cosmetic, but it insults intelligence if it's not completely absurd to claim that a modification that allows a gun to fire 800 rounds per minute is merely cosmetic. But apparently to the NRA, 800 rounds a minute is normal, covered by the founders' language in the Second Amendment, when no one could even imagine at that time of the Second Amendment that there be an instrument that could fire 800 rounds a minute. Mr. President, we've seen how our nation's laws hurt our families and hurt our communities again and again. Every day there are shootings that don't make the front pages of the newspapers, but they ruin lives. They tear families apart. They test the very fabric of our society. The Orlando shooting was one of 43 shootings on Sunday. 43. 43 shootings that resulted in 18 deaths, including 5 children. 5 children. We can honor the Constitution. We can honor the intent of our founders. But I don't think that I'm alone in believing that we can enact common sense, realistic gun safety laws that respect the Constitution but also protect the lives of Americans. I've heard here many times of my colleagues, the government's #1 responsibility is the safety and security of its citizens. Well, you've abdicated that part in this regard. In the case of Orlando, the lives of those in the LGBT community that always had to live with the threat of violence hanging, and that 90% of the victims were Hispanic, is a horrible reminder that bigotry and hate are not dead, and that the forces of evil have no compulsion about using our nation's lax gun laws against us. Again, we need to come together and say no more. We need to hold the common sense center and pass realistic gun safety measures that can respect the Second Amendment but fully protect Americans from a Second Amendment that has no limits, no common sense, no realistic restrictions.